This episode is brought to you by Midas Healthcare Solutions, bridging compliance, patient safety, and proof of controlled substance waste has never been easier. Midas View from Midas Healthcare Solutions provides cutting-edge technology to do just that. Midas View provides proof and operational efficiency, the only diversion technology that delivers both, real-time visual verification of medication disposal, powered by AI and machine learning to detect improper drug wasting behaviors, seamless integration with your ADC, EMR, and diversion software, making reconciliation fast and identifying outliers with ease, RX Intercept, customizable random or targeted sample collection with a secure chain of custody.
Welcome back, everyone, to Diversion Insights. I want to welcome back John Hertig and Les Louden. We are going to discuss the third study that John has been involved in regarding controlled substance waste, and it's the second one that he's done with Les. John runs his own healthcare advising company, and Les is the pharmacy manager at Baycare Health System. I want to welcome both of you back.
Thank you, Terry. Great to be here.
Absolutely. To start us off, John, please recap what the first two workflow studies were that you did.
Yeah, happy to do that. And really, this has become a major theme of a lot of our research that we do with hospitals and health systems for a variety of reasons. One, the biggest, we know there's a lot of waste, specifically with medications in our hospitals and health systems. And we also know the more particularly controlled substances that get wasted, those are floating around our hospitals. And there is that then diversion risk associated with that waste process. So our first two studies really were designed to capture the volume and then the workforce impact of wasting controlled substances, originally starting with fentanyl, morphine, and hydromorphone. We then added in a second study with ketamine and midazolam. And not to bury the lead, Terry, but we waste a lot. We do waste a lot of controlled substances. I'll give fentanyl as an example in every study, or at least both that we've done previously. About 98% of the time we're wasting fentanyl if we're using a 100 microgram presentation. And a lot of times we're wasting half of that presentation. And a lot of times we're wasting even more than half of that presentation. And that takes workforce time to then be compliant with policy and regulation and document that waste. They fill up our waste destroyers, our waste canisters. They take time away from patient care. And then you spread that amongst so many different units. And then you expand it way beyond fentanyl into other medications, particularly controlled substances. And we see a significant financial and workforce impact with wasting medications. And so we continually work with really excellent health systems like Les and Baycare to try to quantify that information and then run strategies to optimize product and practice. Because the more that we can match products with the practice that we have and take care of patients, you'll have less waste, less documentation need, less workforce impact, and obviously less diversion risk as well. To tee up the study, Terry, that Les is going to talk about in a little more detail that we just published, there was this glaring gap in the literature. We had done work in anesthesia, in nursing, in different procedural areas, but we really hadn't studied pharmacy, which is just such an odd thing, being that we're pharmacists. We hadn't really looked at the pharmacy department impact of this type of waste. And so that was the goal and the objective in setting up this next study that was just published with Les and his team at Baycare.
Okay, great. Thank you for that recap. Yeah, it is interesting, when I go to do an assessment at a hospital, how many I find that are still not using the fentanyl 50 micrograms that they could. And all I ask for, show me 30 days, right? And my focus is diversion mitigation. So that's what I'm focusing on. But after talking with you and the studies that you've done, I've always, it's like, and your nurses would be more satisfied, if you do this. It's not just the mitigating, mitigating the diversion risk. Well, I want to encourage all the listeners to go back and listen to those previous episodes for more detail. One was titled Results of a Workflow Study Time of Controlled Substance Waste, and the other was Confronting the Hidden Cost of Medication Waste in Hospital Settings. and you can get more detail on those studies and how they performed them and their conclusions. Okay, so let's jump into the current study, which was published last month, and that was titled, another sexy title for a pharmacy paper.
Yeah, we need to improve our titles, I think. They don't exactly roll off the tongue, do they?
Yeah, so here we go. Assessing pharmacy costs of intravenous push controlled substance waste in hospital-based areas, a multi-site study. All right, so Les, John went through a little bit of why this study was conducted. Is there anything else that you want to add to set this study up as we talk about it? Why did you want to be involved with this one?
Well, there's a lot of components that go into the diversion process. I think that's really where, at our health system especially, we want to start to identify what all those components were and put the pieces together. Because that's where, again, we kind of looked at this in 3 different components, where there was kind of the manual review and what it takes to kind of go through some of those manual transactions, even if we didn't have a diversion software per se. What would the time take if you tried to kind of go through all those different types of transactions that occur? And then we were trying to take a look, all right, when we do have diversion software and we have cases that are kind of developed from that, how long does that kind of take generally to go through? I think we did a nice job of kind of keeping it conservative too, to where, there were kind of a lot of steps beyond what we were analyzing, beyond just pulling the data, starting to kind of get some general conceptions about it, and then providing a recommendation on what's a next best step, as far as, meeting with team members and et cetera, and all that other items that kind of can go in down the line. So we didn't want to include all those other components we know. So we didn't kind of solve everything, but it kind of gives us some more insight to kind of starting to queue up what is it actually taking for us to go through some of those automated processes, non-automated processes. And then also the last piece was looking at all the capital expenses and ongoing maintenance costs for this, because I think that's, while it's really nice, we've been avoiding, dumping all these down the sinks and things, there is a cost to kind of coming with that waste and still having that waste and having to account for it from a cost perspective as well. So I think we did a nice job of trying to see what it takes to kind of have these, waste receptacles across our entire system, because it starts to add up when you have 16 hospitals and all the different units and locations these can live, as well as just the ongoing maintenance with it too. They require upkeep with batteries and cartridges. And so I think we wanted to see kind of what that looks like. Again, as John's saying, if we start to adjust overall our controlled substances to match, what our practice is doing, to ultimately help prevent some of these processes that are coming up in the workflow to help us reduce all of that.
Right. Okay. Your team looked at a lot of transactions, over 4,000 of them. So let's break it down and walk through, what did that actually look like? How were these transactions reviewed? So it sounds like you did 2 different things, one that was manual and one that came through software. Can you talk to us about how they performed those assessments?
Yeah, so in that first manual piece, we were looking at a subset of those 4,000, and we kind of extrapolated, from that subset, what it would look like if we reviewed, from that, because obviously going through 4,000 of those would be unfeasible for our research team, even though the 333 some that we went through was a lot of time. And so we wanted to really kind of see how long it took them to kind of go to validate essentially what's kind of coming through in the system that's pulling that. So that's where we're kind of using that from our diversion software, but then going back and then kind of double checking essentially the AI piece of that's kind of pulling that. So that's where we wanted to check. Again, it's kind of pulling in 3 different buckets. Is it likely waste that's happening? Is it likely the administration that's missing? Or is it both of those components? And so that's where we were kind of doing some cross-validation, how long it takes to kind of go back in the record, search for things maybe it was missing. A good example is like in our procedural area, sometimes they may write it in their note, but it didn't really make it to the MAR per se, or they have just different areas where they can document that we haven't quite tied up all the AI components or to our diversion software yet. And like the CAP lab, there's a unique system kind of called XPER. We don't have that quite linked up yet. So that's kind of a gap in our processes right now, but we are in talks with Blue Site to kind of close that gap. And so how long we wanted to check that process would take for each of those. And that was a little over like 6 minutes in occurrence to kind of go through and just kind of evaluate that time.
Okay, so you started with, if I'm understanding correctly, you started with the software, and then if something was not reconciled, so nurse removed something, but there's partial or whole missing, then if the software, if the unit is an area that doesn't capture it in the software necessarily, then it becomes a manual review, like a truly manual review, because the software wouldn't capture it to begin with. Is that what you're saying for the manual piece of it? That's what you're considering? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it's basically cross-validation, because then it's still, you still have to kind of take the time to double check some of that. And that's kind of giving some insight. If you were to double check it, how long does it kind of take to do that process?
Okay. So you so even if it all matched, you double checked it to see what
exactly. Yeah. So that's why we were even just trying to do it. All right, we have all these events and instances that are happening. Is this accurate? And, trying to get an assessment of how long that, more of the time piece. But we did learn some interesting insights from, again, where other documentation could be occurring. Sure. That is, again, that's why we kind of said it's not really totally, all of these showing up where we're missing both, but it may have just been showing up as both because we didn't have that documentation that the software could go ahead and match it up. So that's where we would get some additional insights to know, okay, it was, they actually had the administration there, but it didn't show up because it doesn't have that data feed yet.
Okay.
So,
yeah. So it's kind of what your diversion, did you use your usual diversion monitoring people, or did you put a separate team together that isn't typically involved in monitoring your software?
Yeah, we kept it consistent. So the first one, we had the same researcher went through that exact same process. And then for the case review, we did use our single diversion analyst to kind of go through that as well. So that way there's kind of consistency with the research team that was doing each of those for how they were kind of following the steps to go through to make sure that they checked kind of all the different areas of the EHR to make sure things were accountable or missing, and then the timestamps for that accordingly.
Okay. So essentially what your researchers did is what any diversion monitoring person would be expected to do if they have software surveillance. And correct me if I'm wrong. So you go through, something shows as a variance in the case of Blue Site, and you're like, okay, well, where is it? Let me go dig into the chart and see if I can find a record of the fact that it was charted somewhere else. And then if the paperwork, they're doing it on paper or it's not set up to capture it, then that's one thing, that's one bucket. And then there's the other bucket of, well, the software should have captured it because, it's a standard nursing unit, but it didn't, and we can't find it anywhere. And so it's a variance. Truly, like it's missing.
Yeah, and that's where even when we're doing case reviews, and looking at specific incidents, we have our analysts go back and look at particular incidents. Again, just double checking because maybe it missed something or how does it all make sense? So this is kind of good insight to, again, translate to whether you have no diversion software and you're just having to go back manually on each incident, or if you do have diversion software, how does that kind of help? How long does it kind of take even with that process? Because it's not perfect. You still kind of have to go back and look at the data even that's given to you.
Okay. All right. So not only was this a good study in terms of how much time you're spending because you're not maximizing your smallest doses or your orders, but it's also a nice study to show how much time is devoted to diversion monitoring. Right? I mean, it's some numbers that people can use. Okay, this is how many transactions we have that have some sort of variance, and this is how long it takes me as your diversion specialist to look at it.
Exactly. And so it's not an easy process. I think that's the moral of the story, and what our conclusions kind of draw to is there's a lot of steps and a lot of double checking and validating that goes along with it.
Right. And that's just
to jump in to add to this, because I think that's in addition to quantifying the actual data and getting it peer reviewed and published, it also helps our colleagues then make those estimates, because we don't want our colleagues to have to do what Les and his colleagues did. We don't want to have you shadow a nurse, throughout the wasting process 400 times. We want to give everyone a starting point to then do their own assessment. And that will be part of, our takeaway, and you'll probably get there, Terry, but, don't trust us, but verify. Go take a look at your own health system and use some of our datas or modify them a little bit to make it applicable to your own institution. But don't redo everything, because it is very labor intensive to get accurate and evidence-based data.
Right. Yeah. You have some idea. Anybody that does the monitoring of the software has some idea of how many hours they spend a day, right? But you also get sidetracked on other things, and it's related, but maybe not directly related, or you get called away. And so this really kind of breaks it down so people can see. I did have a question. So midazolam had a lower average. I'm just curious, do you have any theory on why midazolam took less time on the workflow? It was like 4 minutes. So fentanyl average 6 minutes 54 seconds. Hydromorphone just over 7 minutes. Morphine 625. Ketamine 631. Lorazepam 648. And midazolam 444.
I think it just kind of depends on the transactions as they occur.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think there's necessarily, you can see they're all generally in that same scope of time. Yeah. But I think
minutes slower, or a couple minutes faster.
Yeah,
maybe. Or I just thought it was kind of interesting. I thought, I wonder if they have any idea on what the deal is with this.
Yeah, that's probably one of those data anomalies, right? Where you probably want to use the median instead of the mean, and you kind of toss out the 7 and the 4, and it's probably
Six-ish.
For all of them more in the 6s range, which is what we saw.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the other part of your study then that involved the capital and the waste receptacles. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so we went through this journey a few years ago across our health system, and it was a lot to standardize. Again, just even figuring out how many units we needed and where. We also have ones that are particular for more inpatient units, and then for the OR space, because again, just on how they're bulkier in the inpatient side, and then they're kind of smaller, meant for fitting on the anesthesia carts for the anesthesia intraoperative spaces. So when we kind of took a comprehensive look across, all the different stations we have across our health system, and so our large facilities have over 100 of these. Again, essentially just kind of matching up where we have ADCs. We also have our waste receptacles, and it's kind of been a journey a bit from a pharmacy side, just because again the labor that goes into that, and that's where we've kind of had to learn about the frequency with changing out the cartridges, because that happens biannually. So trying to kind of have a process where our techs are kind of given dedicated days to kind of do that twice a year. And that's where we looked at our Morton plant facility to kind of review their techs and how long it was taking them to how many they essentially could kind of go through in a day to kind of come up with the workforce time waste we did in this analysis, to figure out how long it kind of takes them to do that work and that time. And then that's where we kind of did some extrapolations from a cost perspective for that. But otherwise, again, there is a lot of cost for just the batteries, ongoing maintenance of the cartridges and things like that too, that adds up to in addition to the total capital costs for implementing across our system.
Changing the cartridges twice a year, if there was less waste, would you have to do it less often, or would that change at all?
I think we could. I think we are still learning a bit with them, and because I think when there's higher use on different units, but I think from the general manufacturer standpoint, they do kind of just recommend that twice a year swap out. So I think that's where we're just trying to plus it's really hard to, when you have that many units like at our site where we have over 100 of those, it is kind of hard to assess how full some, because that requires a lot of touch too, to go by each of those to double check. So it's a little bit just easier for us. Just go ahead and commit to changing them out twice a year without having to kind of go through the headache of checking each one of those individual 100 units per se.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot involved with it. And I think too, going back to the monitoring piece of it, I think this study can be used to kind of let nursing leadership know how much time pharmacy is spending reconciling when the nurses are not wasting properly. We have to take away the procedural areas where it's done on paper and, the software's not capturing it necessarily. But if it's supposed to capture it, this is a lot of time that staff spends chasing it down. And this doesn't even include, what I call tracking and trending for diversion. This is just making sure everything is accounted for, I should say.
Yeah, if I may just jump in there, you're absolutely right. And the way we are looking at this is it's just another set of data that contributes to this idea of total cost of care, right? So when you're looking at all these different elements from the nursing time to the anesthesiology time, the pharmacy time, the waste, the disposal, it's all part of this big puzzle where when we're making thoughtful decisions, and Les and I talk about this all the time, when you're making thoughtful decisions around how and what products to carry and how you're implementing it, it's not just a price on the ledger, it's what is that real total cost of care? Because you're looking at, I'm saving a few pennies here, but maybe I am buying that, fentanyl 100 and throwing half of it away. And so we need to be more thoughtful about cost effectiveness and all these different elements that go into providing safe and effective care to patients.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything in the results that surprised either one of you?
Honestly, it was a lot around the waste receptacles and just how much that adds up. But like I said, when you have that many units, it does add up. But the same kind of concept with even just the general, how many incidents and things were coming up. And that's just from a quarter's worth, right, of data. And that's how we're really trying to use this to springboard into what John's kind of alluding to is we got to improve our practice, right? Because if we can start to eliminate a lot of these instances that are coming up by just, starting to match, again, manufactured doses up that we can acquire, we potentially can eliminate a lot of this waste across the board. And that's the ultimate goal because it does have a lot of downstream effects that we're seeing on pharmacy, especially with the extra work we have to do in addition to nursing and everyone else that's kind of involved in that waste process. So we're doing some comprehensive analysis on our controlled substances to see where we can start to swap out products or bring in new ones. Of course, we're going through controlled substance shortage right now, so it always seems to, even if we found products we like, whether they're there full-time is still hard to determine, but at least if we kind of have the game plan when products are available, and ones we can switch to, we'd like to do so to help optimize it all.
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it? I don't, since I'm not in a hospital working day to day, I've kind of lost track of some of that shortages, but man, I know 6-7 years ago when I was in a hospital, that was ridiculous what was going on. It's really hard. You do all of this work and it's like, okay, this is what we want to do. And like, can't get the product. I mean, that really creates a problem. And a lot of places don't want to make the change to a smaller strength during that time because, it's a lot of work and re-education and all of that stuff. And it's like, why? We don't even know that we can get it on a regular basis. So we're just not going to do it. And you can't blame them for that, right?
For sure. Yeah. It's not as bad as it was 6-7 years ago, but it's kind of trending back a little way where we're down to like 2 products, which is a challenge. But luckily, knock on wood, it's kind of staying at least steady enough to where we need it. But it does make everything a challenge logistically because there's a lot of, especially for larger facilities, right? It's just extremely complicated to swap out. Does everything fit in the QB pockets? It's definitely a challenge just enough logistically.
Yep, it is a lot of work, making the change, keeping track, reverting back, all of that type of stuff. Other than reviewing product selection, is there anything else that you have planned based on the results of the study for all of are you going to, roll things out to the whole hospital? And maybe it's still early, maybe you haven't quite done that evaluation yet as to what's next and how to respond.
Yeah, so really trying to look across, again, because we're a health system, we try to do things consistently. And that's where, again, with going through all our waste data, then helps bring some more insight to what we're not doing consistently to try and standardize that practice. And again, same point of emphasis of trying to get in those products to where we're all doing it the same. But I was able to kind of get some good insights to seeing what some sites are doing, where there's some opportunities, and then how can we kind of attack that and standardize that across the system, because that's ultimately what we try to do across all our different pharmacy processes that we have, policies and procedures, et cetera. Because that way we're just able to kind of get a better, purchasing power and all those things that kind of go into the inventory and supply chain components of this. But it's not easy to get a lot of that data, but I'm also comparing it with, Fresenius Kabi does have a nice kind of tool that you can kind of upload some of your data for waste analysis. So I'm kind of having our data that we pulled internally kind of compared with that to see how it matches up. So that's in the works currently.
Yeah, nice. All right. Do either one of you have the next study planned, or are you taking a break for a while, Les?
Well, there's always more to research, I will say. I think our next steps with regards to this specific diversion issue is to maybe do some technology assessments. There are solutions out there and they need to be assessed, and it needs to be evidence driven. So that's on the horizon. Meanwhile, Les and I are partnering on a different study looking at ready to use bags versus traditional piggyback method, again, trying to assess waste and how we can take care of our resources, which are continually restricted in healthcare. So trying to make the most of what we have. So that's on the horizon as well, Terry.
Nice. Yeah. So cost of bags versus pharmacy making it.
You got
versus expiration dates and how long you can use it. All right. Good. Looking forward to that. Has that started yet, or are you?
It is underway. It is underway.
Okay.
That'll be a year-long endeavor. So it'll be a little bit before we have results, but it's in action.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. Anything else either one of you wants to add about this study or future studies or surprises?
I'll just say, Terry, I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to share, our work. It's been such a fun collaboration with Les and Baycare, and there are plenty of other colleagues too out there that are seeking to collaborate. It does take a collective effort to try to put this evidence out into the literature, but that's why we do what we do. It should be practice-based, it should be evidence-based, and it should drive better care. So we're going to continue to move in that direction.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you both for your time, and thank you both for the work that you do. And you do, like you said, other hospitals don't have to redo this. Just take what you have done, maybe tweak it a bit, or take your numbers and start there. And it gives them, they're always looking for numbers that they can give to their leadership, right? And so you are filling a very important need that I'm sure a lot of facilities have, and I'm sure they appreciate the work that you do on their behalf. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
A special thanks to our sponsor, Midas Healthcare Solutions. If you want real proof delivered efficiently that your controlled substance waste is compliant and supports patient safety, Midas View finally provides it. Stop by their exhibit at ASHP Midyear Meeting in Las Vegas, Exhibit 1153, for a live demonstration. You can also visit www.midashs.com to schedule a demo. When it comes to controlled substance compliance, seeing is believing.